Oh yeah, go ahead, pump it up. I'd love to catch a firefly that's far away. I see your whole crew staring as I put the speed down. You're like a soup can, I'm like Superman. I saw Veronica, the girl that put you off blast, cause you played harmonica in art class. I know you want her to, but you don't move cause you don't have any shoes. You touch a pom-pom, I touch an A-bomb. Aw yeah.
20 nights in the ice is a long time when there's hostels on the hill. It's not about what they want, you just gotta walk your walk.
Hello, this is the 86 with On the Sensors, and we have here with me.
Majo. What's up, guys?
So today we are talking about everyone's favorite thing, mitigation. And when I say everyone's favorite topic, it's not mine. I hate mitigation so much. But we're going to get into that, why I hate mitigation and why you should love mitigation. So we're going to start off with different kinds of mitigation that we have in our decks. Just to name a few, before I pass it to Majo, we have mitigation that does remove die with a value of 2 or less. We have mitigation that's spot to remove a non-character type. We have mitigation that removes damage only. There are all types of mitigation that can go into a deck. Majo, let's switch it over to you. What do you think when you're building a deck, and how do you typically plan to put those types of mitigation together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like zero cost mitigation, and that stems back to when I first started playing Destiny. I was way too heavy into mitigation, right? I was spending all my money, round one, round two on mitigation, right? And of course, I was a noob. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was sort of floundering. But nowadays, obviously I've learned. And but also I still just have like an affinity for zero costers like Loth Cat and Mouse, Measure for Measure, Rallying Cry. So those tend to be the first ones I go after when I'm if I'm building like red or yellow hero, immediately I'm looking at Loth Cat, Rebel Assault, Rallying Cry. All those are zero cost. I've got pilots flanked by wingmen, and then I'll think about multi-die removal. So for me, it's like, all right, what zero costers can I put in here? And then you got to have some, in my opinion, how I kind of think about it, multi-die removal is you have to have some of it, right? Whether that's a headstrong or a power of the tribe or a VPD. Because if you get rolled off the table, then you're just dead. You have to have something. So those are some of my initial thoughts. What do you think, man?
So mitigation is always a crazy topic for me to get into. And I'll be honest that I'm more of an aggro player. And because of that, I don't like mitigation as much. And typically I like to invest in my die. So I'll use these small die that are like 2 or 1 value, and I'll find ways to make them bigger. So, hunt them down will increase my die. So being deceptive is one thing I use for mitigation because no one wants to pay to remove a 1 ranged or 2 ranged. So getting around that is key, but also realize that everything you do costs resources. And we can think of the example if it binds. Everybody knows it binds all things. If you get that turn 1, it won't save you any resources. Turn 2, it'll save you a resource. Turn 3, it'll save you a resource, cumulative 2, and so on and so on. If you think about those resources for supports or upgrades, that's 2 damage each turn. So on average, let's say that you're paying the resources turn 1, so it's 2 damage. The next turn, that's 2 damage, so you've done 4. So then turn 3, you've done 6 damage on average. And that's one thing I kind of go into thinking about my resources with mitigation. Sorry if I'm being long-winded here.
It's good. Go.
So with that, typically I will play Mit later in the game when I feel like it is something that I really need to do to stay alive. I think that we all feel like if I deal more damage to you, turn whatever, and then you deal to me, then I've won that turn. Likewise, if you dealt more to me than I have to you, then you've won that turn. And I want to try to find ways to make that stick. If you, I think it was said a couple videos ago, we had Norm on. If you play mitigation, it's essentially a discard and a disrupt is what someone's resolved against you. So I'll try to plan for mitigation to be later in the game, and I'll tend to vary on what I'll put. With Blue Hero, I'll definitely remove die showing damage all day long. I don't want someone to build up with modifiers. The specials can be harming on things, but maybe I don't go as hard into removing non-die showing damage. With yellow, it really just depends. Yellow, I'm gonna do more lower cost. I don't want the specials. I don't want things to splash against me. And I really go for the color of the card and what I plan to put in that deck and what's available to me and the typing of what I have. Jedis can play Disciplined Mind. Spot a Jedi to remove a non-Jedi die. So planning what you have, your character types, and your deck are going to be the first step in putting in mitigation. And so I will typically hold off, and the multi-die mitt is helpful, but there's a lot of different ways to multi-die mitt, and I like some of them better than others, and maybe we can talk about those in a little bit.
Yeah, I think if I can just cut in, I think what you were touching on a little bit there was this idea of not spending money on mitigation in the early rounds of a game, right? And using that to ramp. Like to the point that Norm made, if you spend that dollar on electroshock to remove someone special in turn one or round one, that's essentially like you said, that they're disrupting you because you've just spent a dollar and they got rid of a card from your hand, and that's one less card, one less dollar that you have to then ramp and build your board state early on. And so yeah, that's a mistake I know I used to make early. Was it just immediately the gut reaction, oh no, I'm going to take 3 damage, I better remove this. But I think when you start to realize that your health can be a resource, right? If you've got 12 health, which is pretty good, then it's okay if you go down to 9, right? In round one. And maybe even it's okay if you go down to like 7 or 8. I mean, sometimes that just happens. Your opponent has a really good turn. But if you're still alive and you've got submit for future rounds, that's okay if you were able to build your board state. So yeah, there's just so much that can go into it.
Yeah, and I think definitely I'm going to say typing of the characters and what you think is popular in the meta is what you're going to put in for mitigation. I don't see a lot of Blue Hero out there. I was even, seeing Ahsoka, seeing R2, you can still play a Disciplined Mind if you have Jedis on your team. They're not very popular right now. They're not circulating the meta. So if you play Blue Hero and you have a Jedi on your team, Disciplined Mind I think is a good call. Fluid Riposte is an excellent call, but not if you only have one 5 health blue character. So definitely you want to look at the spot requirements because a lot of blue mitigation has a spot requirement. A lot of mitigation does in general. So looking at that and planning across your deck. What do you think about how much mitigation do you typically put in your deck?
I mean, I like to go anywhere from I've gotten probably better at this over the course of time, but probably anywhere from maybe 8, 9, maybe 10. Just depends on the style of deck. But I also consider like riot shield, armor plating. I mean, that's mitigation, right? You're saving yourself some damage. So lately, when I've been playing, red, yellow villain, I've got 2 armor platings, 2 riot shields, just by default. And I'll see how it goes and I'll adjust it. But yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I would say at least 8 removal cards, sometimes more. It just depends on if I have a really fragile character that's critical to the strategy, maybe I'll have more. But yeah, it varies, man. What about you?
I will vary strongly on the deck, and I will put in mitigation depending on what upgrades I have. So if I have Veteran of War, which can remove a die if it gets a special, I'll maybe consider putting in less mitigation. If I have Sheehan Mastery, I'll consider less mitigation. I'm running a card like Makashi Mastery, which can resolve a die if I showing damage if I do a discard, I may consider less mitigation. All of those kind of go into a little bit of what I'm planning and what I want to do,
Hmm.
and hopefully to get those out turn one, and ramp them up, get them, and I want to stay alive a little bit. So thinking about what the resource curve in general is for your deck, and making sure you don't have 34 cost cards.
Right. Yeah. So with the new set, what was one of your favorite new mitigation cards? Do
Oh,
you have one?
favorite new. I've always went back to reversal. That's
Okay.
not a new
Not
one.
not new, but yeah, that's one of your favorites
Yeah,
for sure.
that's what I've always went with. And um, man, I'm trying to think of anyone new that I've used, and I think I've still been with classic mitigation. I would say that if you want to talk one mitigation that I really like, Ambin Blaster. Remove a
Nice.
character die when I play that upgrade, so it's great on Mando. I remove a die and I get to roll him in. It keeps tempo going, which is something I think that you mentioned a little bit ago with the riot shields and the armor platings. Elaborate on that tempo strategy for me.
Yeah. I mean, certainly if you've got troopers, those riot shields are amazing to play. Even play them when that character isn't necessarily being threatened. So if you play that in advance and then someone goes to hit that character, right? You don't have to spend an action to pop the plating, right? It doesn't say action remove the shield to block the damage. It just happens and it pops off, right? You don't lose any speed. Depending on when you play, right? If someone's got like a 3 melee showing and your only mitigation is the riot shield, you obviously are playing it to stop that some of that 3 damage. And so yeah, in some ways you don't yeah, you still have to spend an action to play it. But if you play it in advance, anticipating damage, maybe a couple of turns in advance, then yeah, I mean you just keep that tempo, keep it rolling. So yeah, I'm a big fan of those equipments.
What's really key on that too is you can still claim the battlefield, and then you have riot shield there, and so even with the claim, you have something set in place. And the same thing goes for everyone's favorite curse word, Viper Probe Droid. You know,
Yeah.
if you claim, someone rolls,
Yep.
it's still there. It's still doing what it does.
Good old
As
After
long as
Effects.
yeah, and if you have Death Watch, then you get a resource for Viper Probe. So it's advantageous to get that resource and go in for there. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of little tricky things. So bouncing around a little bit, we'll go back to the mitigation topic. What's your favorite mitigation from the new set?
Um, Probably Roll in the Mud. That I think that card is super strong. If I'm playing Hero Red, then that's an auto include for me. Two of those, and because it turns any character, because the way the RRG is written, or the rules gurus have spoken on this topic, that because you're the one activating your opponent's character with Roll in the Mud, they do not get the after effect, right? They don't get if it's a Hondo, they don't get the 2 set aside loyalist dice. If it's Jin, she doesn't get the detect. If it's the new Han, right, he doesn't get the 2 veteran stormtrooper dice. So that, I mean, it's just huge, right? It can really mess someone up, and you get to remove one of those dice they just rolled in. So you remove the best die. It can be a little risky though, because if you do it on like a Qui-Gon, and he rolls out like 2 4-for-1s, a 2 melee on a Quilland, and a 2 then obviously you're between a rock and a hard place. But still, you probably aren't going to want to play that against a Qui-Gon who's loaded up with Jarkai and stuff. So, but yeah, I just think it's super strong. I really like that one. So, the other thing I wanted to mention before I forget it, you talked about cards like Ammon Blaster and Makashi and Sheehan, that they're upgrades that either on the on playability or have a special side that can remove a die. So you might play less mitigation in the form of events in your deck. Similarly, I know Guardians can let you do that. Valorious Tribe can let you do that. If you can move damage around, keep your main dude alive, um, and just sort of redirect the damage. That's another way to think about. So, for example, if I'm playing Chewy and I've got, I don't know, Chewy Lumpy, Valorious Tribe, I don't want any mitigation in my opening hand, and typically you don't really want that anyway, right? As we've heard some really smart people tell us that you don't want any mitigation turn one anyway. You want to ramp. But I mean, especially if you've got Guardian and things and ways to heal with the tribe, for example, like you don't want that. You have ways to mitigate and move damage and heal. So just another interesting, spin on that.
So going back to Roll in the Mud real quick, because of how the errata is for Guardian, did you know that you can roll in the mud and Guardian the other die?
I
So if
did see
someone rolls
that.
in 2 die, they can remove one and Guardian the other. And I was like,
Brutal.
that's, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's so vicious.
Yep.
So going into that, I think you brought up a good point too. With there are a lot of things that are mitigation that aren't just removing die. So we have the riot shield, the armor plating. We can talk about health, and I love back to therapy. That's one thing, especially on Django, Qui-Gon, and you can play it on Palpatine as well with unlimited power. Back to therapy to heal. And you talked about Valorous Tribe, um, doing that healing as a way to stop mitigation. And some people may stay shields. What are some ways that you like to mitigate that maybe aren't removing a die?
Yeah, I know we talk about this one a lot, and I think I've even noticed just the two of us when we play, like when these things happen, we resolve them instantly. So discards. If you've got a couple of dice showing discards, don't re-roll those, depending on the circumstance, right? If it's absolutely critical that you get a kill, or just depending on the situation, then maybe you re-roll them for damage. But I would say 9 times out of 10, those discards can really mess your opponent up. It's gonna get events out of their hand that might be useful to them. It's gonna get upgrades out of their hand. It's also just less cards in their hand that they can in turn use for rerolls. So discarding from their hand, that hand disruption can be huge. The other one, right, Paysides are pretty prevalent these days. You've got things like the Beskar Spear. I mean, that's an amazing upgrade. It does have a 3-for-1. What's the other one? Is it the Riot Control Baton? I want to say that one has a 3-for-1.
And Security Baton?
Security
I
Baton.
know what you're.
We'll put
Is
it
it?
up on the screen. One of those, but lots of things that are really strong. A lot of times you'll see read-to-play weapons that have Paysides, and you can mess someone up with a disrupt, right? If you've got a disrupt, just keep that in your pool. If you know they've got Paysides, that can really mess with their sequencing and things, and they can't resolve that if you disrupt them. So another way to think about it.
And so I think we've spent some time on this. So we're going to talk about two things really quick, and then we are going to end it. The first thing we're going to speak on is how do you decide when to play mitigation? Let's say you have 10 of them in your deck. Let's say you draw one per hand. Maybe you have two per hand, etc. What do you think is the good time to play them, or how do you weigh? Am I going to use this now, or am I going to wait, or what?
Yeah. So if I have relatively healthy characters that haven't taken damage yet, or they have enough health, sometimes I'll if my opponent rolls out and they're showing some pretty threatening dice, I may not. Let's say they've rolled out some base sides, and they have a second character who has modified sides, and so I might think they're going to leave those base sides in the pool and wait to bring in their second character before they resolve everything. And so I might hold on to my mitigation to wait for that to happen. I haven't played it, so they might assume I don't actually have it at all. And meanwhile, they roll out their second character, they get their modified side, and now they're hoping to be able to resolve the base plus the modified. Meanwhile, I take out their base sides, right? So that's sort of a one scenario to maybe think about. I mean, obviously, if you have a card like Rallying Cry in your hand that has a specific requirement of like you have to be dealt damage in order to play it, you have to play around that. You have to figure that out. Same with like Rebel Assault. You have to be showing a die showing range to remove a die not showing damage. So there's things like that. But I think probably if you want to be a little tricky, right, up your game a little bit, have a little more strategy. Think about maybe holding on to your removal and playing it at just perfect time. Can be impactful.
Yeah, I think that's key too. We talk about removing die at the right time, and you can also resolve die at the right time. If you are playing against Yellow Hero, maybe think Rye and Cry might be in their deck, or Lothcat, or you can think about all these kinds of things that are relevant to Yellow Hero, and just being aware of the meta and what people may play, I think is going to go a long way there.
Yeah.
Any final word on that topic before I move on to our last thing?
No, I don't think so, man. Let's do it. Let's move on.
All right. This is the big chat we talked about in the new set, maybe. I'm sorry I didn't have one for the new set, but favorite mitigation of all time, or what are the notable things that you love to do?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on it earlier. The zero costers, Lothcat, Rallying Cry, Flanked by Wingmen. Flanked by Wingmen is just so good. I love playing pilots and drawing that card, right? Especially if you lose the battlefield roll and you take the shields, and then as one of your early actions you play Flanked by Wingmen and one of your characters has 3 shields. It just feels so good. Um, yeah, zero costers and really making the most out of them. I mean, Forsaken is just a no-brainer. Um, yeah, it just feels really good when you can actually mitigate dice and not have to spend any money doing it. And sometimes it doesn't work out, right? Sometimes you're just going to get hit in the face because you weren't able to play the zero costers, because some of them do have, they're very situational. But when it does work, it can really, it almost feels like you didn't play mitigation because you didn't have to spend for it, right? So you can still ramp and remove at the same time. And so I like that. I like that a lot.
I will say on average, I'm typically more of a health person, so I like fortitude on my character. And having some extra health can give me imposing figure to gain a resource. It can give me the boost to feat of strength to remove 2 die instead of 1. So that's a mid option that is really popular with me. And then also you have extra health. I mean, 3 extra health can go a long way depending on what your opponent has and what they can resolve. So that's really key. Since a lot of people are talking about the reprint list, and that's on everyone's minds right now, my favorite removal from the before time was Entangle. I loved getting 2 die that 3 cost or less. It was great for specials, and just hitting someone that didn't expect it. That was
Yeah.
one of my favorite pieces of Mitt.
Tangle is so good. Removing a 3 in a blank or a 3 in a special. Yeah, super good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then
I would say I know how you feel about easy pickings. I did not vote for easy pickings, um, but I did vote for ISO. One of the staple cards I used to love with Blue Hero was Overconfidence. So I'd like to see that come back one day. It's just, I mean, I know we have, was it Rising Whirlwind, that's somewhat similar, but it has that spot requirement for weapons. But Overconfidence was just classic because you get to reroll 2 and then remove the one that's the lower value, and you get to pick in case of a tie. So you're sort of soft mitigating at least one and then removing the other. So pretty good. So that's a good one. That's one I'd like to see come back.
my the last honorable mention I'll give in here, I really love, and I don't see anybody play it, is Quad Slam. If you have someone that has 2 characters, if you're blue villain, it's choose a character die belonging to up to 4 characters and remove them. So it's great if you have watching your career with great interest, and someone has a 3 wide or something they're rolling out, or maybe use salt flats to blank a die, and then when they roll out next turn, maybe they discard the reroll and you hit them with that quad slam and just remove 2 die, and then that's unexpected. So it's one card that didn't see a lot of play, but it's one card that I think is so good.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I have seen you play that card a lot, especially when you used to play Maul, um, the new Maul. And it's just so funny how people have different habits or preferences, because I would never think to include that. I would always choose, I don't know, your powers are weak over that, because it is a 2-coster, or who knows, right? Some other card or some other event over that one. So it just never really crosses my mind. But I think that's what's cool, is that once you try something, you almost have to just sort of see it to believe it. Sometimes you play it and you're like, oh wow, that really did work. That was super impactful. I'm gonna, you're now more inclined to play it. So that's one I'll have to give that one a try.
All right. So any final mitigation pieces that you love that you want to mention?
So I'll just say no, not in particular, but I will say that I know you more than anyone think the best. And correct me if I'm wrong. The best mitigation is a dead character.
Yep. I will typically go, I love my high damage dealing decks, and I'll just focus someone down. So
Yep.
a dead character is good mitigation, and they're not going to come back. On the sad part, if they kill your character first, then that's good mitigation for them.
Yep.
Why don't you let us know in the comments down below what you think and what your favorite mitigation pieces are? And that's going to be all for us. Thanks for joining. We'll see you on the sensors, on the table. This is Beta 6, and that is
Majo, thanks for watching, guys. Adios.